Thank you for clicking on my e-paper, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to present. I have no financial disclosures. Today I'm going to talk about the use of public data sets to identify areas with higher than average visual disability, lower than average amount of ophthalmic providers, as well as favorable political environment for ocular telehealth. Because I think that ocular telehealth can help expand the reach of what we do, but there are both technical and political legal challenges. So specifically, we were looking to identify regions which were the most likely to benefit from interventions with the highest likelihood of success. So we used a number of publicly available data sets, including from the Census Bureau, the American Community Survey, which provides self-reported visual disability estimates at the county level, and this is freely available online. And there's a number of other interesting variables in there as well that may be relevant to you. We also use the area resource file, which collates data from a number of sources that gives us the number of ophthalmologists and optometrists per county. And likewise, this is available for anybody to download and use for free. Because the American Medical Association doesn't recognize retina as its own unique specialty, we sought another way to get at the amount of vitreoretinal capacity in a particular area, and we used the Medicare and Medicaid data set to look at the amount of CPT code 67028 intravitreal injection per each zip code and map that to the county. And so this allowed us to calculate several county level metrics, including population weighted quartiles of visual disability, as well as quartiles of eye provider density. In other words, number of providers per 100,000 of the population. And then we compared the state political favorability towards telemedicine using the American Telemedicine Association's metrics that are available and updated from time to time. Then we took these metrics and compared visual disability and provider density in a linear regression model and then plotted these data to allow for visual comparison. So we found that areas with higher eye care provider density had lower overall visual disability in a univariate regression that was statistically significant. And basically what we found was that one more provider per 100,000 people in the population, there was a decrease in visual disability of 0.026%. That sounds like a small amount. It's a small absolute amount for sure. The range of disability that was reported per county was generally under 5%, but you figure this is a large population. So in the median county population across the US is about 26,000. So in a county like that, that would be almost 700 fewer people reporting visual disability per one provider increase in 100,000. So that is the ability to have a substantial impact. This result was slightly attenuated when adjusting for confounders, but remained statistically significant and still quite significant at the population level. And this is just a visual representation of this data showing box plot the different quartiles of visual disability, and this just showed essentially the median number of eye care providers increasing as the quartile of visual disability went down. So when we looked at the ATA grades, we looked for states that had 10 or more counties in the lowest quartile of provider density, and that also these same counties had to be in the highest quartile for visual disability. And we found 5 states that met those criteria, and then Nevada had just shy of that with 9 counties. And I'll talk about Nevada, dwell on Nevada a little bit moving forward just because of its size and the fact that it did have an A grade. States with a C grade, so these would be states that in addition to needing a technical intervention would also require lobbying and policy efforts at the state level. So those same metrics, we found 7 states that met those criteria. So these would be states that if you're interested and motivated to do telemedicine in these states, there may need to be something. You may need to get on the phone with your senator, congressman, to your state senator, state congressman, to have that conversation and work with other people who are interested in telemedicine and other domains. And this again is just another way to show some of that same information, but I think the takeaway here is that when you look at the states that received the A grade, these were plenty of counties with high percentages of the population reporting visual disability. So you can get to work right away and work in this space in states that have high favorability to telemedicine and still reach a lot of people. So now I'm going to show a number of maps, and basically this first map is simple. This is just the states and their grades as assigned by the American Telemedicine Association, and throughout most of these graphs, green is going to be good and red is going to be bad. So the green states received an A, the blue states were B, the yellow states were C, and just Connecticut and Rhode Island had F in this. Here, these are all now at the county level, so these are all by quartile of visual disability by county. And so again, green is the lowest quartile of visual disability and red is the highest level of visual disability. And again, you can see there's quite a bit of noise here, and it's hard to know at looking at the whole entire country how to immediately get to work, other than I think, in the southern half of the United States, it looks like there may be more visual disability, and in the northern half maybe less. This is why, as I mentioned before, I'm going to focus on Nevada because, again, this is a green state with respect to its telemedicine favorability, yet there's a fair amount of disability reported in this state. Back at the ophthalmologists in Nevada, there's quite a bit of red, a little yellow, and a little blue, whereas interestingly, optometrists, there's a bit more green and blue, and I think that just makes sense because particularly when you think about a retina specialist, we need to be in an area where there's enough population to generate the case volume that we need to be efficient, whereas an optometrist is practicing at more of a public health level perhaps and can still be successful in a more less populous area, I should say. So to get at retinal provider capacity, which again I couldn't use the other data to do that, these are counties here in blue had no 67028 billing. And so this is just sort of the map of where retina isn't. Now, this doesn't mean that this procedure was not performed there, it just means it wasn't billed there as far as Medicare is concerned. So if someone, basically where the provider or the practice's NPI was located was where these get checked off. And so again, each of these maps can stir a question or be provocative, but requires further study to understand exactly what's going on. And this is essentially the inverse of that data, just showing where the majority of the 67028s were billed. And obviously, throughout all this, you always have to think about what's going on in the background. So this is a heat map of the US population. So obviously there's not going to be a big red spot in the middle of a very poorly populated area. But again, I think that it still gives you a sense of what's going on. And then here is, again, just getting at the limitations of this type of an enterprise. These are the U.S. counties, and so you can see they're much more contiguous and overlapping in the eastern part of the U.S. and in the central U.S. It's really a well-ordered grid, and then out west they're quite a bit more dispersed. So again, needs to be thought of in the background. So in conclusion, we found that a low density of eye care providers was associated with higher visual disability. And we also found that areas with favorable political climates, or we concluded that these areas should be targeted and prioritized. And other areas do have need, but they will require lobbying and policy interventions as well. So I would certainly like to thank my collaborators as well as my funding sources. Thank you very much.